first speaker for this morning. It is my pleasure to, in a session that's underwritten by KSM-66 Ashwagandha, introduce Chris Kilham. He's here to talk about stress, the mind, and ashwagandha. Chris, welcome to the virtual stage here. Glad you could join us. Looking forward to your presentation.
So thank you. That was a great tee up. I really appreciated the information you covered, Len. Next slide, please. This is brought to you by KSM-66 Ashwagandha. This really isn't going to be an ad, but I will be talking about a lot of the activities that the company performs basically to make a good extract. Next, please. So I want to start out with what is ashwagandha. Many of you know, some of you don't. This is a plant called Withania somnifera. If somnifera looks familiar, it's because somnifera means tend to sleep. Ashwagandha always refers to the dried roots of the plant, which are the only part of the plant traditionally used as a natural remedy internally. And you'll find ashwagandha, wild in Africa and the Mediterranean, but it really caught hold and has had its greatest use and also its greatest scientific exploration in India, and especially in the 5,000-year-old system of Ayurveda, or what they refer to as the science of life. Next, please. So ashwagandha has many names. Some people call it winter cherry, Indian ginseng, even though it is certainly not a ginseng at all, or Ayurvedic ginseng. And I think that's really just a tip of the hat to ginseng because it's such a time-honored, strengthening, adaptogenic root. The name ashwagandha actually means smells like a horse. Ashwa means horse, gandha means smell. When you uproot ashwagandha, it has a faint aroma of an exercised horse. It's not strong at all. But in the old scriptures, ashwagandha root and its preparations have been known to impart the strength of a stallion. So there's still that horse connection there. And as I said, the name somnifera means to sleep. Specifically, ashwagandha is classified as a rasayan. So in the many thousands of plants that are used in Ayurveda, there's kind of a cream at the top called the rasayan, and these are the life extenders, and also the ones that enhance brain function tremendously are referred to as medhya rasayan. Here on the right-hand side, you see freshly harvested ashwagandha roots, which will eventually be turned into extract. Next, please. So ashwagandha, all of these beneficial roots in nature actually contain hundreds of compounds. And it is a mistake to simply identify one group or two groups as being the most important. Really, there's a whole constellation of ingredients that work together in natural harmony. The withanolides play heavily in ashwagandha, and most ashwagandha extracts, if they are standardized to withanolides. But there are other alkaloids and glycosides and fatty acids. The chlorogenic acids themselves are spectacularly protective and help health in many different ways. There are, as I said, hundreds of different compounds. We do see some companies trying hard to turn ashwagandha into a drug, into a pharmaceutical, by radically increasing the withanolide value. There's no justification for doing that. We don't know that's wise at all, but the root has a natural harmony of hundreds of occurring compounds. Next, please. So ashwagandha has a long history of being studied, because among the 7,500 plants and plant parts that are used in Ayurveda, ashwagandha is number one, ashwagandha root. We know it's an adaptogen. It helps people to maintain homeostatic balance in times of stress. It improves psychomotor skills, enhances mental function in a variety of different ways. It's anti-inflammatory, it's anxiolytic. So in other words, it helps with mild to moderate anxiety. It definitely improves relaxation and sleep, though it doesn't make you sleepy. You just go down, lie down, and you go to sleep, which is what the body is supposed to be able to do. It enhances overall cardiovascular function, and also it's an immunomodulator. And this is a very good time to explain something about health. I've heard a lot through COVID-19 about people who really want to boost their immunity. You really don't, actually. Not any more than you want to boost your heart rate or boost your temperature. All healthy things in the body exist in a mid zone. Whether it is respiration, whether it is temperature, whether it is heart rate, whether it is blood pressure, whatever it might be. And this is true for immune function as well. You don't want something too low. You don't want something too high. Ashwagandha is one of those botanicals, and there are just a few that actually helps to bring overly high immune function down into a healthy mid-range and low immune function up. So it really is a modulator, not a booster. Next, please. So in terms of memory and cognitive function, I want to really kind of ride on much of what Len was talking about in this one study that was conducted with KSM-66 ashwagandha extract, as are all the studies I'm presenting here. There were 50 healthy adults over 35. These are double-blinded, placebo-controlled studies. And I like to say, and it's true, I always feel sorry for the placebo group, because the active components group gets all kinds of benefits, and the placebo group really doesn't get anything. People were excluded if they were impaired in different ways, if they were taking certain types of drugs. So basically, mentally healthy people. The active ingredient participants received 600 milligrams of KSM-66 ashwagandha extract every day in two doses of 300 milligrams. And to be clear, that's not necessarily because it's better to break the doses up from a functional standpoint. It's that from a compliance standpoint, it's easier to take two smaller capsules over the course of a day rather than one big capsule. A lot of people don't like big capsules. So this was the dosage guideline. Next, please. So at the end of 8 weeks, the KSM-66 group and the placebo group were both inventoried. There are all different kinds of inventories and questionnaires that are common among medical doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists all over the world to understand what's going on in a person's mind. We saw improved general memory, significant improved spatial span, so actual ability to better assess the relationship between things, improved executive function, overall kind of global function of the mind, sustained attention. So let's say maybe you can typically read for 2 hours. Well, you might be able to read for 3 or 4 as a result of taking ashwagandha. And faster information processing speed. So real, true, tangible results in terms of enhanced mental acuity. Next, please. Ashwagandha supports cognitive health. Here we are. You can see in this infographic here some of the different points that I just mentioned. So it's not just one effect. It's not just short-term memory. It's not just long-term memory. It's not just attention. It's not overall executive function. It's all of these together. We see improvement on standard questionnaires and different indices with the 600 milligrams of extract per day. Next, please. So the researchers concluded, and not a surprise, that ashwagandha can be effective in improving immediate memory and general memory, and in improving executive function, attention, and information processing speed without any side effects. There are some botanicals where it's actually impossible to do an LD50 test. LD50 test is a nasty thing. You basically give something to animals in increasing amounts until half of them die. You can't do an LD50 test with ashwagandha. The animals don't get sick, they don't die. They just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, and that's all there is to it. This is very safe stuff. Next, please. So in terms of stress and anxiety, one study of 64 healthy adults, again, was split into 2 groups, an active ingredient group and the placebo group. We saw the active compound group taking 300 milligrams twice a day, as with the other protocol I just described. And the people were subjected to the perceived stress scale. Their serum cortisol was assessed. They were given general health questionnaires, depression and anxiety and stress scales. And what we saw, next please, was an improvement in these things, a reduction in perceived stress by 44%. That's a lot. You know, people walk around with a tremendous amount of stress, and to actually experience that going down, you know, making it more manageable is a big thing. 44% is huge. We saw people's scores and overall discomforts reduced by 73%, serum cortisol reduced by 28%. And it is cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine that are the three real big stress hormones in the blood. We need cortisol to live, but we don't need it at high levels. When you can bring it down into a healthy mid-level, which is where you want it, you feel relieved of stress. And so this is really an experiential thing. The adaptogens as a class are experiential, and ashwagandha is no exception to that. It's something that you actually feel. In the depression and anxiety domain, we actually saw reduction in scores by 71.5%. That's quite remarkable for a simple supplement. Please, next slide. So again, the researchers, when I say the researchers, all of these studies must be peer reviewed before they can be published in journals and before they appear on the National Institutes of Health PubMed health database. And so this is what the peer reviewers said, that this full spectrum ashwagandha root extract improves an individual's resistance towards stress and thereby improves self-assessed quality of life. People just plain feel better. And when you consider how many things are difficult, anything that can really help you feel better that isn't going to boomerang on you and cause you some sort of health problems is nothing but a treasure. Next, please. So a second stress study, 60 men and women. There were three groups. There was the placebo group. There was a group that got 250 milligrams of KSM-66 ashwagandha root extract, and a group receiving 600 milligrams. Basically parameters were assessed: serum cortisol, perceived stress, the Hamilton Anxiety Rating Scale, which is the most common anxiety rating scale used worldwide, and sleep quality. Next, please. So what we saw was that there was improvement among the 250 milligrams per day group, but more significant improvement with the 600 milligrams per day group. And this is useful for those companies that are putting out gummies and things that just won't tolerate a full dose of extract. So you can see a difference, 33.7% for the 250 milligram group, 38% reduction. This is in perceived stress. 16 versus 32% reduction in serum cortisol levels. So really big reduction with the 600 milligrams. We saw in the Hamilton anxiety scores a reduction of 13% with the 250 group and 16% with the 600 group. And we saw a difference between 35% improvement and 46% improvement in total sleep quality scores with the 250 milligram and the 600 milligram doses per day for the duration of the study. Next, please. And there's a third study that is really directed towards stress and weight management, a total of 52 subjects, again, a placebo group, and a group that got 300 milligrams of extract twice daily. And this is really to see if there would be any reduction in body weight in adults under chronic stress. So in addition to some of the other rating scales that I mentioned previously. There's also a food cravings questionnaire. The Oxford Happiness Questionnaire basically assesses person's total happiness, and I actually asked to be used that for this study. I wanted to see if people actually wound up happier. The 3-factor eating questionnaire and body weight and body mass index assessment. Next slide, please. So basically the results of the weight management study showed almost 33% reduction in stress, a reduction in food cravings, 22% reduction in serum cortisol. And we know that high cortisol levels are associated with more food cravings, especially for refined carbohydrates. A 3%, which is modest, reduction in body mass index, and overall greater control of cravings and improved overall happiness. So it really is the case that when people take ashwagandha, when they take KSM-66, and they do so for a few weeks, they just plain wind up feeling happier in the day, as well as having fewer, food cravings that are really not advantageous to health at all. Next slide. There was a study on ashwagandha and elderly health, basically to see what happened in an older population where people had insomnia and some moderate anxiety. Similar assessment tests were used along with a sleepiness scale, mental alertness on rising, and sleep quality as in a previous study. Next slide, please. Basically what we saw with 12 weeks of supplementation, the placebo group getting nothing, the KSM-66 group getting 600 milligrams a day, very significant increase in quality of life, an increase, 23%, almost 23% increase in physical quality of life, 19% increase in psychological quality of life. Interestingly, 5.5% increase in overall social relationship quality of life, increase in environmental quality of life, and a total 15% increase total score of improved quality of life as a result of KSM-66 supplementation. I think what's important to say here is that if you're really going to test something, you want to test it in different groups of people for different durations of time to make sure that you cover as broad a spectrum as possible of people who may benefit. Next slide, please. So this is a sleep study, 29 people taking 600 milligrams of KSM-66, 19 taking a placebo for 10 weeks. Next. And we saw significantly shorter time falling asleep, real significant sleep efficiency, that is staying asleep, overall sleep quality, self-assessed, significant improvement, and more calming, a reduction in mild to moderate anxiety, overall more refreshing, nourishing, satisfying sleep. Next slide, please. So you can see 33% reduction in sleepiness scale, indicating improved quality of sleep overall, better mental alertness on rising, and overall almost 57% improvement in sleep quality. Next, please. So a second sleep study, an 8-week study, 40 participants given 300 milligrams twice daily, 40 other participants given a placebo, similar inventories and questionnaires used to assess their sleep experience. Next. So we see, about 16%, decrease in onset latency. How long does it take you to get to sleep? Decrease in waking up after sleep, so more people staying asleep, increase in total sleep time, increase in sleep efficiency, and slight increase in total time in bed. So overall, very good, very positive results for sleep. Next slide, please. So basically, KSM-66 Ashwagandha, it's a 5% withanolide, highly concentrated organic ashwagandha root extract containing no other parts of the plant. The extraction method took 14 years to develop. It's clean and green extraction using no solvents of any kind like alcohol or any of the exotic solvents, acetone, butane, none of that. This is clean and green. Next slide, please. It is the root extract with the highest concentration of withanolides of any. It has 24 human studies completed and about 26 coming on board soon. KSM-66 enjoys about 65% of the global ashwagandha root extract market. It's the only company that's vertically integrated from certified organic farms right up through manufacturing and shipping. It is all contained within one vertical column here, one company, one ingredient. The company has a huge number of quality certifications, and they aren't just pretty labels on a wall. They mean that the company has to comply with endless regulations that demand high quality standards of manufacturing. And it's a neutral taste. So if you're putting it in foods, if you're putting it in bars, if you're putting in beverages, it responds very well and blends very nicely. Next slide. So here is a brief look at some of the scientific studies. As I said, there are many more on board. Steadily, the company has been building science for ashwagandha, really pushing this and certainly borrowing from the pharmaceutical sector, but with a natural agent that's been used for thousands of years safely by hundreds of millions of people. Next slide, please. So here you have on the left-hand side a snapshot of the KSM-66 fields. There are 1,600 acres of organic ashwagandha cultivation in Rajasthan, India. There I am holding some ashwagandha, and you can see the plant is very, very pretty. The tops will be chopped off and left in the fields for compost to enhance soil fertility. They aren't used as medicines. Next slide, please. As I said, the company is vertically integrated, runs its own farms, its own manufacturing facilities, its own laboratories, warehousing, everything that you need to assess the product. Next slide, please. The social responsibility dimensions of KSM-66 are extraordinary. The company funds a very large school. The company built a hospital. It has run a vaccination program during COVID that has delivered vaccinations to tens of thousands of people. The company supports women to make crafts. The company also runs the Thalassemia Anemia Center for children, and in every way contributes to the community, pays higher wages than any of the other activities that people can find in their area, really doing their best to make a contribution to people's overall well-being and quality of life. Next slide, please. So I want to thank you. I hope there's time for some questions. As I said, this has been brought to you by KSM-66 Ashwagandha. I'm Chris Kilham.
Chris, thank you very much. Great presentation. We do have some time for questions, and hopefully we'll get to them all. And if not, we'll make sure that we do get some responses to those that do not get their question answered. I'm glad you finished a little bit about the farmer, the community, and the infrastructure. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the total benefits of the vertical integration, the opportunity that provides for KSM-66, and really what it means to the consumers and what it means to the market.
Well, in those rare instances when companies are vertically integrated in the botanical space, when they cultivate their own botanicals, when they do so by clean and green methods, when they extract, when they analyze, when they keep it all contained within their own auspices, it obviously means greater control of the supply chain. If you're buying from others, you actually can't know for sure everything. You may trust people, they may be trustworthy, they may be doing everything right, but you really don't know the way you know with absolute certainty. So part of it is that also you can tweak all those controls. Maybe you make sure that there's more of a cover crop in a field because you've determined that that will better enrich the soil. Well, you can't do that if you're buying from somebody else. And if you're doing your own extraction and you're doing your own lab analysis, then you can stay on absolutely every part of that process and not miss anything at all. So those are the advantages to vertical integration. It's control. It's very careful watching over everything that happens with the extract.
Excellent. Early on in your presentation, you were describing sort of all the components and all the ingredient benefits or constituent benefits. And in our industry, some of that is tied to the entourage effect, or the term entourage effect has been used. How is that playing out in your communications? Obviously, with analytes is the most common ingredient associated, but really there's an entourage effect here. So you can't drug make this. You're going to lose that. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I'd like to use an apple as an example. What if you quadrupled the amount of pectin in an apple? You'd have a mouthful of mush. Okay. You need pectin in an apple. It's part of what makes an apple an apple. But you put too much in, and all of a sudden it's just this mouthful of goo. Okay. I know that some companies are trying to turn ashwagandha into a drug with very, very high withanolide values using the leaf and the stem, which the Indian government is quite alarmed by the way. But as soon as you do that, then you miss out on the total spectrum of naturally occurring compounds that have existed in their proper ratio forever and that have been used for 4,000 years. So what I would say to you is that, I don't think it really is the case that this move that we have in our industry, whether it's, 95% EGCG, which is garbage, doesn't work. Super high concentrations of single compounds. This makes no sense. That's the pharma model. We've been there. We've done that. This is a different thing. We know that people benefit from the whole root. We know that people benefit from extracts of the whole root. So really, it's a matter of keeping it clean, keeping it pure, and not trying to turn this or any other botanical into a drug.
So now I'm going to flip gears on you, because one of your studies actually was dose response or showed the signs of dose response, especially with cortisol. This is where you had the 250 milligram and then the 600 milligram. Any other plans to sort of establish broader dose response? Because that seems pretty definitive.
Well, it is definitive. I mean, it's one study out of 24, and soon it'll be one study out of 40. I think that you want to be able to serve the market. I've been in the extract side of things for like 27 years, used to work with Pure World and NatureX and others. And, they're all trying to really establish the right parameters for different extracts. We know that gummies, for example, are very popular right now. And they're coming on stronger and stronger. The Kardashians are about to release a gummy, and all hell's going to break loose when that happens. So the point is, we wanted to be able to do something that would reflect what's typical for that. So let's say you put 125 milligrams of extract into each gummy and you recommend 2 a day. The company wanted to prove that there was a benefit. It isn't as significant as with the 600 milligrams, but in terms of the cortisol, it was still a good reduction. So you can really kind of hang a stress claim hat on that amount.
Got it. Okay, so we've got some other questions that have come in. There was one about, the KSM study is designed with twice-a-day dosage rather than, is there any reason that taking KSM in 2 different time points would be more efficacious than taking them together?
No, and I had mentioned that previously. This is really strictly for compliance. If you have 300 milligrams of extract, it will easily fit in what's called an O capsule. which is not a very big capsule. If you got 600, you're really talking a 00 cap. And that's where you start to get people's resistance to a larger capsule. So really it has to do with compliance and not because there's any demonstration of improved efficacy by separating the doses. Now, you may find that you do better if you take a full 600 milligrams in the morning. That's what I like to do. But some people, maybe a couple hours before sleep, they go, well, why not? I'll take it at this time. I do think there is bio-individuality. I do think that people respond differently. I would say experiment around, but we have no evidence at all that splitting the dose is in any way more efficacious than taking it all at the same time.
Great. Let's talk about what's happening in the marketplace and maybe some of the conversations that you and KSM-66 are having at various levels. So obviously the program dates back to 2012 as far as that timeline that you showed us. And obviously there's been traction in the marketplace. Ashwagandha is a very popular ingredient. What are the current conversations at brand? This is a multi-part question. What are the current conversations maybe at retail? What's the consumer feedback loop? And how has that changed?
Okay. I think that the company gets precious little feedback from retailers at all. So the only thing I can say is that, with KSM-66 being in 1,600 products, and most of them supplement capsules and tablets, but certainly not all, almost all retailers are selling KSM-66. And if the overall global sales are an indication, it's going very well. But I would say, we don't get good feedback from retailers. I mean, I don't mean we don't get feedback that's good. We don't get feedback, period. That really isn't something that happens much. In terms of the manufacturers, who are the primary purchasers of ingredients, we get a lot of feedback. It is typical for a company to start out with a product, let's say a sleep product, and then maybe use the extract in a sports product, in a mental enhancement product, in a sleep product. You know very well, Len, companies like to formulate their own special blends. You don't have hundreds of companies who all go, yeah, we just want to put out 600 milligrams of KSM-66, because then you have to ask, well, what's the difference? So there is a lot of ingenious kind of cookery with different blends, and many of them wonderful, other adaptogens, other sleep agents, depending on what you're going for. So we do get a lot of response from people in the manufacturing sector. And I think that overall, given that these products are selling to the general public, even though we get scant feedback from the general public, it's apparent that this is filling a need. I think anything that can enhance people's quality of sleep, anything that can legitimately, for real, reduce stress so that people have a more relaxed, open, relieved experience is going to be popular. And that seems to be the case.
Yeah, that ties into one of the other questions that we received was co-formulation. What are the patterns? Obviously it's going to be health concern specific, or the ingenuity of the formulators, as you mentioned.
Right.
Also, there was a question about approaches to something like adjunct therapy. Obviously in our industry, we've got to be very, very careful for it. But that happiness score that you talked about would really lend itself to sort of that adjunct approach.
Well, yes, it would. And here's the thing. We know of no contraindications with ashwagandha. One medical doctor in India once said something to me. He said, I know that with ashwagandha, I can give it to anybody, no matter what their condition is, and never have to worry about the safety. And this was a clinical physician who'd been in practice for over 30 years. And he said, I've pretty much given ashwagandha to everybody who's walked in my door. I think that we have something that's remarkably safe and effective. And yeah, if people can have, when you look at the adaptogen class, and it's certainly not the only experiential class, obviously the caffeine class, the stimulant alkaloid class, they're experiential as well. But when you look at the adaptogen class, so we're talking ashwagandha, rhodiola rosea, Schizandra berry, Panax, ginseng, eleutherococcus, and more. These things are experiential. These things do reduce stress. These things make you feel good. It's no surprise that many formulators will take ashwagandha and then add rhodiola to it, maybe add some holy basil, a touch of this. And if you have really good, high quality extracts, we know now people will pay for efficacy. People will pay for good results. And, frankly, I don't think there's anybody who wouldn't mind being a little happier.
As we sort of segue into a couple more questions before we do wrap, is KSM-66, I mean, it's an ashwagandha company. Is there any intention to augment that in any way, shape, or form? Can you share?
At this time, there is no intention to expand. I mean, I suppose it could happen. In a way, I think of KSM-66 the way I think of pycnogenol, a spectacular single ingredient, tremendous body of science, the science growing all the time, the benefits quite extraordinary and broad. I guess I could argue both sides of, yeah, it might be a good idea to add something down the road, but I could equally argue why. If you make a thing that's really exceptional, and if that satisfies big needs, really big needs here, it's not just toe itch. I mean, I'm not saying toe itch isn't a bad thing, but that's not the worst problem in the world. We're talking about mood, we're talking about sleep, we're talking about energy, we're talking about people getting through the day. I'm not convinced that the company would ever need to make another product. I really believe this is sufficient.
Interesting. Okay. And I could see you arguing both ways as well. So Chris, I saw you a couple months ago at the Animal Supplement Council, which is pet supplements environment. You want to talk a little bit about the pet market?
Yeah. The company has done studies on cats and dogs and horses. And you can, through behavioral assessment, you can determine a lot about their stress, about their anxiety. And it turns out that with those animals, with cats, with dogs and horses, when you give them ashwagandha extract, they are less stressed. They demonstrate far fewer stress and anxiety behaviors, kicking stalls, scratching, biting themselves, worrying parts on their skin, all of those types of things. And they just seem more happy and content overall. So this is as you know, Len, this is a growing field, pet supplementation. This is bigger and bigger all the time. And companies are looking for things. Not everything that's effective in human beings is effective in animals. So we didn't know going into these studies if the results would be equally good. And it turns out that they are. So I think that there will be more pet studies, more cat, dog, and horse studies. I'm not sure that, we'll go after goats or giraffes. I kind of don't see the point, but, who knows? Sky's the limit, right? But I think there will be more studies on animals to just to boost and really, grow this category out.
Okay, I want to sort of question, obviously with many of these mental wellness, stress type of studies, you've got your subjective and objective criteria. So qualitative, quantitative. How do you sort of plan that into your research and then your communications? And is there a difference? I mean, I guess there would be a difference. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't open up somebody's brain pan and check their blood. It's not cool. It's not ethical, you can't just like drill a hole and check it out. So we don't know everything that's going on in people's brains. What we do know is that these things are ashwagandha is remarkably effective for the brain. And what I think is that we have to rely on the best that medicine has to offer right now. And that's these different rating scales, whether it's the perceived stress scale, the Hamilton anxiety rating, the general health questionnaire. These are things used by medical doctors, especially and including psychiatrists and psychologists all over the world. And they've proven their worth. So right now, that's the best thing we can rely on. And like the Oxford Happiness Index, that was just sort of serendipity. I asked, a man who is largely responsible for, parts of these studies, what would you think about asking them if they were happier? And he actually thought it was a wonderful idea. And that was how that came about. So right now it has to be questionnaires. Who knows? At some point, there might be other forms of imaging that would give us a lot of these answers in a more kind of concrete, if you will, objective way. But we don't have that right now.
Yep, got it. Want to talk a little bit. So the BMI result that I saw at 3%, I think it was, or 3% and change. Do you want to comment maybe on the statistical significance of some of these results? Because usually that's a term that's used, and so I would presume some of these results were statistically significant, certainly if they were published in peer review.
Yeah, the reduction in food cravings was significant. The improved eating behavior was significant. I mean, a 3% reduction in body mass index is not something to throw a parade over. It's good. It is admittedly kind of in the, in the margin of error category, though. I would never wish to see ashwagandha promoted as a weight loss agent, because it's not. I think it can be helpful in aiding people if they're already working on themselves, have some sort of a program going, aiding them in reducing cravings for foods that aren't good for them, aiding them in certain ways. But I would not call this a weight loss agent. And that really wasn't the intent of the study. So I would encourage companies not to put this out as a diet aid, because it's not.
Okay, so quick question. The pet topic, there was a question about when, or has that been published? When will it be published?
Yes, these are published, and I think the delay, I'm not sure if any of the animal studies are up on the KSM-66 Ashwagandha site now. There is a scientific studies tab on the site, which you can look for. They are published, and so they are available. And whether they're up on the site or not, I'm not sure.
Okay, but we can certainly circle back and make sure that the audience gets that.
Oh, yeah.
One concluding question. Is there any danger? I mean, this is very exciting. Is there any danger that this gets sort of that magic bullet aura, or does the message need to be much more clearer and concise?
Well, I don't believe in magic bullets. Nothing is going to remedy your life. Life is hard. I personally think that the best results people will get will occur if they exercise regularly. And that can mean going out and taking a walk. It doesn't mean you have to pound iron in the gym. If they eat thoughtfully, so eating organic foods, the stats are in on processed foods. Processed foods lead to sickness and death. We know this. There have been some major studies that have come out in the past year on that. So eating healthy, eating whole foods, and I don't mean necessarily shopping at Whole Foods, but eating whole foods, foods with integrity, and drinking pure water, not drinking sodas, not smoking cigarettes, not engaging in those harmful habits. That's where you're going to get the best results from KSM-66 ashwagandha root extract, or from any other supplement, is by really a holistic constellation of behaviors. If you want a better life, let's face it, you have to work at it. And this is one component, a very good one, and it might be catalytic for other things, but it should never be construed as the panacea, as the magic bullet, because nothing is.
That's great. That's a great way for us to wrap up. Chris, I really enjoyed both the presentation and having this conversation with you. Thanks to those
same here.
questions. And again, we look forward to continuing it. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you so much, Len. You take care, and I hope that the rest of the program is equally rewarding.
Thank you very much.